Hey everybody, it's a rainy day here in Sarasota, Florida, thanks to Storm Debbie passing just outside of us in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a little rainy, but I figured what a great day to, since I'm home anyway, let me do a quick little video and review the NAR, National Association of Realtors, settlement agreement and some of the changes that are upcoming for buyers and sellers. There's two main changes, and I want to go over those because that's the two things that affect realtors and the consumer. One, the buyer's broker compensation can no longer be listed in the MLS. Before, it can always say whether it's 3%, 4%, 2.5%, it was always listed. Now it cannot be listed in the MLS. Anywhere, not in attachments, nowhere in the language, nowhere in the description, nowhere. Secondly, if you are a buyer working with an agent, an exclusive buyer broker agreement, EBBA, is required. And I'm going to review what the National Association of Realtors settlement flyer is. I've got a few highlighted things I just want to read off to you. That any buyers will be required to enter into written agreements before touring a home. And I'll get into that language as well. That compensation must be objective. There must be a start and end date to any agreement, just like a listing agreement. There's always a start and end date. You know what you're paying the broker, you know what you're paying the buyer broker. Same type scenario here. There are changes to how and where real estate professionals may communicate with each other about offers of compensation. These offers are no longer allowed on multiple listing service, the MLS, platforms. Sellers can still offer compensation off of the MLS. Sellers can offer buyer concessions on the MLS, for example, concessions for a credit at closing towards closing costs. That's kind of separate, but please feel free to ask questions on that. So things to know as a home buyer or a seller. If you are a buyer and your agent uses an MLS, as I do, you will need to sign a written agreement with your agent before touring a home so you understand exactly what services will be provided and for how much. Written agreements are required for both in-person and live virtual tours. You do not need a written agreement if you are just speaking to an agent at an open house or asking them about their services. I will attach this in an email that I send out to you. And I do want to go over a few frequently asked questions that people have come up to me and just asked. They're actually all really good questions because some of them come from realtors, some of them come from buyers and sellers. So the first question is, how will we know what the seller is offering for broker compensation since it's no longer listed in the MLS? Well, there's a couple of ways. A brokerage company is allowed to post on their website for their listings what the compensation is. So if you see 123 Main Street, on michaelsaunders.com or any other company website, if it's their listing, they will post what that compensation is. There's also other means of like flyers or information packets inside the listing. So when you're previewing it, listing agents may show what the seller is offering for buyer broker compensation. Let's see, well, they can also be creative and do a rider on their for sale sign. And it could say 3% compensation, 4% compensation, 2.5%, whatever the number is, they're allowed to display that even on a for sale sign. Mostly, if it's not on the company's website, I think a lot of it's just going to be communication between the buyer's broker and the listing broker. So phone calls, text, emails to say, hey, what is your seller offering for the buyer brokerage compensation? So that way everybody knows up front, including you as the buyer, what is being offered. Next question, what if the seller offers more or less than blank percent compensation? So for example, I'm going to use 3%. 3% compensation is what your buyer agreement you have with your agent. What if the seller offers 4%? Well, if your buyer's agent agreement, your EBBA, only states 3%, the buyer's brokerage company can only be compensated for 3% unless it's modified. That modification, there is a form for that as well. So if the buyer's brokerage is offered 4%, then there has to be a modification to your agreement for that specific property of collecting 4% commission or compensation. If it's less than 3%, well, you just have a couple of options. You need to make your offer contingent upon the listing agency seller, I should say, the seller compensating the buyer brokerage 3% commission compensation, or you make your offer that much less in the amount. So if you know up front 3% is what's due to the buyer's brokerage, you as the buyer, to the brokerage that you're working with, and 2.5% is being offered. So there's a 0.5% gap. Offer 0.5% less than the price. Because either way, you know, it's coming off the top. So it's all about the net dollar. Offer 0.5% less. Offer or ask for an additional 0.5% concession that goes towards closing costs. However you want to word it, any agreement is all negotiable. So make sure that the terms are exactly what you want when you're presenting the initial offer. Let's see, what other questions have I had? Why would a seller offer less? It's a very good question. And everybody may have their own reasons, but for the reasons I just said about making an offer, sellers would want to consider that because they do lose their competitive edge when competing with other properties on the market. Because if somebody else is offering 2.5%, somebody's offering 3%, whatever the number might be, buyers do look at that, or will. Now they will. So that portion does affect maybe what kind of offer they will receive or any contingencies when it comes to the buyer's brokerage compensation. So I think a lot of sellers will come to realize that they'll still offer the compensation, and within the next 6-12 months everything will kind of calm down about this topic. But again, the buyer's broker agreement is still going to be always required. Next question, have commission rates and compensation always been negotiable? Absolutely. There is no industry standard. There's no federal law that states what a brokerage has to be paid. Now, in saying that, every brokerage company and also agents may have their minimum standard. They may say, well, I will be paid this to cover my expenses and the time I invest with you as a buyer or seller, and they're allowed to do that. Industry standard? Absolutely not. They've always been negotiable. But again, companies and agents also have the right to set their own minimum standards. So just so everybody knows, it's always been negotiable as an industry-wide standard. Per the company or per the agent, they set their own policies. What about open houses? So what if I walk into an open house? When you walk into an open house, you are a non-represented brokerage. You have no representation. That's okay. Walk into the house, preview the home. You can ask any questions you want to the agent there because they are working on the seller's behalf. You are allowed to walk into a home with an agent who's working on the seller's behalf. Now, if you start asking specific questions about vendors, inspectors, anything specific that would be really working on your behalf, you have to have an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement in order to have that information shared with you. So just keep that in mind. There is a fine line there. So just that agent, if they're working on the seller's behalf, are they working on your behalf? I think that's pretty much it as far as the main questions that were asked. I will be sending out all of this information along with this video, and then anybody who is currently working with me, I will be sending out the buyer's agreements to be executed, meaning signed, because even if you call me and say, hey, Amy, I love this house. It just was listed. Will you go look at it for me? Give me your opinion. Will you go video it for me? Which happens so often, especially here in Florida when so many people live out of town, out of state, out of the country. I absolutely will do that, but I have to have the EBBA, the buyer's agreement, signed and executed. Now, whether we do 6 months, 12 months, because maybe you're not ready to buy next month. Maybe you're not ready to buy in 6 months. Maybe you're going to come in the springtime of next year. That's fine. We will set the dates however we need to. But I just want to let you know that anything upcoming, I will have to have this buyer's agency agreement signed between you and I. And I'm looking forward to it. I know everything will be great. We'll continue moving forward. It's another form, another procedure, but it is a all 50 states scenario. So no matter if you're buying in Florida or any other state in the United States, this will be required. So it's just part of it. It's a new thing that, well, and I should say this, buyer's agreements are not new. They've been around for years and years and years. The requirement of them to be signed across all states is a new thing. So, all right, well, please feel free to always contact me, call me, text me, email me. Let me know what questions you have. I look forward to hearing from you all. All right, mwah. Bye.